The rain in Port Providence doesn't just fall, it attacks. It was slamming itself against the 3-story glass wall of the Skyline atrium, a relentless drumming that had been the soundtrack to my entire 8-hour shift. My name is Eliza Tran. I'm 24, and by day, I'm drowning in dissertation research on media ethics. By night, I pour overpriced coffee for the 1% at the Blue Dock kiosk, trying to keep my student debt from swallowing me whole. Tonight was a Tuesday. The mall was dying down, the fluorescent lights humming in a way that gets under your skin. I was wiping the espresso machine, my reflection staring back at me from the polished, chrome-tired eyes, dark hair pulled back in a bun that had given up hours ago. Only 10 more minutes. Then he appeared. It wasn't a normal entrance. People usually drift toward a coffee kiosk, drawn by the smell or the need for a fix. This man, he arrived. He moved with a stillness that seemed to suck the noise out of the air around him. He was tall, maybe 34, and wearing a dark suit so minimalist it looked more like an absence of light than fabric. It fit him perfectly, a custom job that probably cost more than my semester's tuition. He stopped at the counter, his presence a heavy weight. I saw a thin white scar cutting a neat line across his left cheekbone, disappearing into his hairline. It wasn't a brawling scar, it was clean, almost surgical. His gaze wasn't on the menu or on me. It was fixed on the small, acrylic, no filming or photography sign we kept by the register. He studied it, not like a customer, but like an inspector cataloging a building's weaknesses. He finally looked at me. His eyes were dark, and his expression was as calm and unreadable as the harbor at slack tide. "Black coffee, no sugar," he said. His voice was low, a gravelly baritone that vibrated in the air. I nodded, my hands moving on autopilot. "Just a drip coffee." "Just black, no sugar." As I turned to grab a cup, a new noise cut through the rain and the mall's muzak, a loud, obnoxious woo. A few yards away, a guy in a gray hoodie was shoving his phone, mounted on a gimbal, into the faces of a couple trying to read the mall directory. A bright LED on the phone blazed, and he was shouting into a lapel mic. "We're live. Port Providence. We got some late-night shoppers. What's in the bag? Huh? What's in the bag?" The couple recoiled, shielding their faces and hurrying away. The guy laughed, a high-pitched, grating sound, and panned his camera around. Looking for his next target, he spotted me, alone at the kiosk. "Oh, hello. Look at this. Folks, we got a beautiful barista working the late shift. Give us a smile, sweetheart." He strode over, whistling, the sound sharp and ugly. He leaned over the pastry case, shoving the phone right into my personal space. The LED was blinding. I flinched, holding up a hand. "Sir, you can't film in here. Please, I'm working." "Just being friendly. It's a public space. Right, tell the stream. What's your name?" He zoomed in on my name tag. "Eliza Beautiful. Come on, Eliza, don't be shy." My face was burning. I'm studying the ethics of this exact kind of predatory, low-rent media. And here I was, trapped by it. My fingers fumbled under the counter for the small, black button. I pressed it twice. The silent alarm that went directly to atrium security. The man with the scar, Axton Caravella, I'd later learn hadn't moved. He was just watching the streamer, his head tilted slightly, with a kind of detached curiosity. It took less than a minute. 2 security guards, their navy blue uniforms straining over their stomachs, walked up. "All right, sir, what's the—" The head guard stopped mid-sentence. His eyes went from the streamer to me, and then to Axton Caravella. The guard's entire posture changed. He went from authority to apology. He paled, took half a step back, and nudged his partner. He looked for just 1 second at Mr. Caravella, then quickly looked away, as if making eye contact was a violation. He cleared his throat and addressed the air between them. "We don't interfere when it involves the Mafia Boss." The words hung there. Mafia Boss. The streamer's obnoxious grin widened. He'd heard it. He turned his camera from me to the guards, then to Axton. "Did you hear that? Did you clip that Mafia Boss? Holy..." This is gold, so what? He owns the place. You guys work for him." The guards were already backing away, hands held up in a gesture of surrender. "We have a patrol on the upper level. Have a good night." They turned and walked away. Just like that, they left me. I felt a cold rush of anger, quickly followed by a prickle of genuine fear. The streamer was high on his sudden, perceived power. He turned back to me, his camera practically touching my nose. "So, Eliza, your bodyguards ditched you. Guess you're stuck with me. What's it like working for a—" A quiet clink cut him off. Axton Caravella had placed his empty paper cup on the counter. He hadn't moved quickly, but he was suddenly between me and the streamer. He was a solid wall in a dark suit. He didn't look at the guy's camera. He looked directly into his eyes. "Turn it off," he said. "It wasn't a request." The streamer laughed, but it was brittle. "Hey, man, I'm just—" "The terms of use for this property, which you agreed to by entering, do not allow it." Axton's voice was still quiet, still chillingly polite. "You are harassing an employee. You're creating a disturbance." I gotta write public. "Policy 17, Axton said, his voice dropping another degree. Non-permitted commercial recording and infringement on tenant-customer privacy. You are in breach." He knew the mall's policy. He cited it by number. The streamer's bravado evaporated. He was looking at a man who wasn't just in the system. He was the system, or at least a system. The guy lowered his phone, the bright light finally clicking off. "Yeah, whatever, man, it's dead anyway," he lied, fumbling with his gimbal. "You'll leave the premises now," Axton stated. The streamer nodded quickly, shoving his gear into a backpack, but as he backed away, he fixed his eyes on me, his bravado returning now that Axton's back was to him. "This isn't over, you bitch. You'll regret this." He turned and practically ran toward the escalators. I was shaking, my anger at the guards now tangled up with a deep, cold dread of the man standing in front of me, the man they called Mafia Boss. He turned back to me. That unreadable calm settled back on his features. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a slim, black leather wallet. He didn't have a card. He laid several crisp bills on the counter. It was far too much for a single coffee. I looked at the pile of cash, then at him. "This is for the grinder," he said, nodding toward the ancient beige machine in the corner. "That one." I frowned. "What?" "Replace this machine." He tapped the money. "The noise it makes. It's pitched too high. It will make it hard for you to sleep." My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't even realized he was there when I'd made the last latte. 45 minutes ago. The machine's motor was going, and it let out a high-pitched, dental drill screech every time. Without thinking, I'd press my fingertips to my temples, a tiny, unconscious gesture against the migraine it always threatened. He had seen it. He'd noticed a detail that small, that insignificant. I stared at the money, unable to speak. The tip was exactly to the dollar. What our manager had quoted for a replacement, $350. I pretended I hadn't heard him. I just scooped the bills into the register, my heart hammering a frantic, terrified rhythm against my ribs. I didn't say thank you. I just wanted him to leave. He took that as his cue, gave a slight nod, and walked away, disappearing into the service hallway that led to the parking garage. The rest of closing was a blur. I counted the drawer, my hands still trembling. I scrubbed the counters until my knuckles were raw. I kept seeing the guards walking away. I kept hearing that word, mafia. At 9:45, I clocked out, grabbed my bag, and headed down to the garage. The main entrance was closer, but the employee route meant cutting through the B4 level. It was faster, and I just wanted to get home to my studio apartment and lock the door. The garage was a concrete tomb, damp, cold, and smelling of old oil and exhaust. The lights hummed, casting long, sickly yellow shadows. My footsteps echoed, too loud. I was halfway to my '99 sedan when they stepped out. Two of them, not the streamer, these were big men, dressed in jeans and dark jackets, their faces shadowed. They didn't say anything. They just fanned out. one blocking the path to my car, the other blocking the path back to the elevator. My blood turned to ice. My keys felt useless in my hand. I opened my mouth to scream, but my throat closed up. "Just leave me alone," I whispered. "I don't have any money." The one on the left chuckled, a low, wet sound. "We know. We're not here for money." He took a step. Before I could finally find my voice to scream, a set of headlights flashed, and a car I hadn't heard approaching glided to a stop just a few feet away. It was a dark gray sedan, immaculate, its engine a low purr. The passenger side window slid down without a sound. A man in a driver's cap, his face impassive, looked past me to the two men. "Mister, Caravella sent me to take you home, Miss Tran." The two men froze. They looked at the car, then at each other. My brain was short-circuiting. Was this a rescue or a different kind of trap? I backed away from the sedan, shaking my head. No, I'm fine." "I don't think you are," a voice said from the shadows. Axton Caravella emerged from the space between a concrete pillar and a white van. He must have been standing there, in the dark, watching. He wasn't looking at me, and he was looking at the two men, who now seemed to have shrunk. He didn't raise his voice. He simply raised his hand and pointed to the ceiling. "You're both confessing," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the concrete space. "On 6 different angles. The one above you is high definition. It catches audio." The two men looked up at the blinking red light of the security dome. Panic flashed across their faces. They weren't actors. They were thugs, and they'd been caught. They scrambled, shoving past each other and sprinting down the garage, their footsteps echoing as they disappeared up the ramp. I was left alone with him, my back pressed against a cold pillar. My heart felt like it was going to burst. The sedan driver simply said, "Sir." Axton waved a hand, and the car glided silently away, leaving us. He turned to me. "I'll walk you to the main street." It wasn't a question. He understood I wouldn't get in the car. This was the alternative. I nodded, not trusting my voice. I agreed only because the street had lights. The street had other people, witnesses. We walked in silence, the sound of our footsteps on the damp pavement. He didn't walk beside me, but slightly ahead, and he kept a precise, almost formal distance, exactly 1 arm's length. He never brushed against me, never offered an arm. It was a sterile, protective bubble. But the way the few other late-night stragglers looked at us, they'd see him. This imposing man in a perfect suit, and their eyes would slide right off him, as if they were afraid to look too long. Then they'd see me, and their gazes would linger, full of a strange mix of pity and curiosity. It made my skin crawl. I felt marked. We reached the corner of Piermont and 5th. The bus stop was just ahead, its little shelter glowing under a streetlight. He stopped. "Starting tomorrow night," he said, looking not at me but at the traffic light as it cycled from green to red. "Don't cut through the B4 garage." The words were flat, a statement of fact. "Why?" I finally managed to ask, my voice sounding thin. He turned his head and looked at a metal sign bolted to a light pole. It was a standard city sign, maintenance area, no public access. He met my eyes, because they know your route. He held my gaze for 1 second longer, then turned and walked back into the darkness of the side street, leaving me under the streetlight with his words hanging in the wet, cold air. They know your route. Not those men, a they. And the implication was terrifying. He knew it, too. I didn't sleep. The bus ride home from Piermont and 5th had been a blur of streetlights smeared by the rain. But Axton Caravella's final words were sharp and clear in my head, because they know your route. The next morning, in the cramped dorm room I shared at Riverside Commons, the gray Port Providence light did nothing to help my state of mind. My dissertation files were open on my laptop, but I was in a different rabbit hole. Google, Axton Caravella, nothing. No social media, no society pages, a ghost. Caravella Consortium. This time I got hit, sparse, corporate, and sterile. A website with a stylized C logo, claiming global import, export, and logistics solutions. Their headquarters was listed as a high-rise on the waterfront, but the search results were thin, suspiciously so, for a global company. I dug deeper, into the forums and the dark corners of the Port Providence press that real journalists avoided. There, the rumors bloomed. Night logistics. The shadow port, whispers about a network that controlled what moved in and out of the harbor after 2 a.m., a system that operated entirely parallel to the one that filed customs forms. There were no indictments, no arrests, just talk. My roommate, Maribel Ochoa, walked in, balancing a law school textbook and 2 coffees. She took one look at my screen. Deep dive. Find out who your new friend is. He's not my friend, I snapped, then rubbed my temples. Sorry, I'm just the guards. Mari, they called him Mafia Boss and just left, and then he knew the mall's policy handbook by number. Maribel, ever the pragmatist law intern, sipped her coffee. So he's smart, and he's got leverage. That's not a crime. The guards abandoned me. Then 2 guys cornered me in the garage he specifically told me not to go to. Wait, he told you not to go? No, that came after, I corrected, feeling flustered. He warned me after he scared them off. He said, don't cut through B4. They know your route. How did he know my route? Maribel. Maribel was quiet for a second, processing. Okay, that's next level, but it sounds like a warning, a genuine one. A warning from the guy everyone is afraid of. I leaned back, frustrated. I don't get it. This guy, he's citing mall policy 1 minute and being called a mob boss the next. Does the mafia even have, an ISO for risk management? Maribel let out a short, dry laugh. They probably just call it overhead, Eliza. And honestly, their risk assessment is probably better than this university's. Look, just be careful. These old Port Providence families, they're not mafia like in the movies. They're consortiums. They're logistics. They're investors. They're woven into the concrete of this city. You don't tug on that thread unless you want the whole building to shake. Her words stuck with me all the way to my afternoon seminar. My professor, Dr. Albright, was outlining our final paper. The topic, he announced, is identifying and analyzing non-state power structures. I'm not talking about NGOs. I'm talking about the systems of authority that exist in the absence of the state. The neighborhood crews, the corporate enclaves, the data brokers, the mechanisms that enforce their own rules, entirely outside the law. My mind flashed, sharp as a camera strobe, to the 2 guards, their hands up, backing away. We don't interfere. It wasn't theoretical. It wasn't an academic prompt. It was the Skyline Atrium. It was Axton Caravella. I knew exactly what I was going to write about. That night, I took the long way to work. I didn't even go near the B4 entrance. I walked in through the main doors, with the shoppers and the tourists, my keys clutched in my fist. The shift was dead, the rain had started again, and the atrium was a ghost town. I was wiping down the new grinder, the $350 grinder that had been delivered that morning, paid for in cash by Atrium Customer Relations, when the clock on the register flipped to 9:07 p.m. And just like that, he was there. The precision of it sent a chill down my spine. Not 9, not 9:10, 9:07. He was wearing another dark suit, this one a deep charcoal. He stopped at the counter. Black, no sugar. I nodded, my hands tight. I forced myself to work, to observe, to be the researcher. I was a student of media, of systems. He was a system, so I studied him. When he paid, I watched his hands. He didn't use cash this time. He pulled a card from the same slim wallet. It wasn't a black Amex or some anonymous, untraceable crypto card. It was a brushed metal debit card, Seastone Bank. I knew Seastone. It was the most boring, respectable old money bank in Port Providence. They sponsored the opera and the new wing at the art museum. Their reputation was spotless, clean, as Maribel would say. As I was running the card, my eyes drifted past him. At a small table near the fountain, a woman with a shock of elegant silver hair was sitting alone. She looked like she could be a professor or someone's wealthy grandmother. A man approached her table. cheap leather jacket, slicked back hair. He sat down, slid a thick manila envelope across the table, and said something I couldn't hear. The woman. Marta Judas, I'd learn later, simply nodded and slid the envelope into her purse. As the man stood, the light from the atrium skylight caught his hand. He was wearing a heavy, obnoxious signet ring. The design was ugly and clear, a stylized black lantern. It meant nothing to me, but the sight of it made my stomach feel heavy. These beans. I jumped, startled. Axton Caravella was still at the counter, looking at the bags of coffee we had for sale. Are they single origin? His voice was just as I remembered it, low, calm. Yes, I said, my own voice coming out too tight. Colombian. I focused on handing him his receipt, refusing to meet his eyes. I felt like a field mouse being politely questioned by a hawk. He was just there, and the air around him felt thin. Before he could say anything else, a sound pierced the atrium's quiet, a high-pitched, terrified wail. We both looked. A little girl, maybe 4 years old, in pink rain boots, was standing alone by the silent fountain, tears streaming down her face. "Mommy!" A security guard, a different one from last night, approached her, looking flustered, speaking too loudly. "Hey, kid, where's your folks?" The girl just cried harder. Axton Caravella didn't even turn his whole body. He just spoke, his voice cutting cleanly through the space toward the guard. "Stop. You're scaring her. Get on your radio." The guard looked over, confused. "Tell your control," Axton said, his tone one of mild impatience, as if explaining something obvious. "To use the white noise speaker array, announce a parental search, internal Amber Protocol, and get her a bottle of water." The guard's jaw went slack, so did mine. Internal Amber Protocol. That wasn't a public-facing term. That was from the 40-page employee safety manual I'd had to sign on my first day. It was the mall's specific procedure for a lost child, designed to avoid a panic. How in the hell did he know that? The guard, recognizing a voice that expected to be obeyed, fumbled for his radio. "Control, initiate an internal Amber Protocol. Parental search for a small girl. Pink boots." Axton watched for another second. He took his coffee. He didn't look at me again. He just gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, not to me, not to the guard, but to the situation itself, as if it had been resolved to his satisfaction. Then he walked away. Not toward the main exit, but toward the private elevator bank by the P3 garage, the one you need a key card to even call. I was wiping down the counter, my mind reeling, when I logged into the employee terminal to check my hours for the week. A new message was waiting for me in the company-wide system. It was marked High Priority. Reminder per Skyline Atrium tenant policy. Do not identify or name VIP guests in any public or private communication. Discretion is a condition of employment. It hadn't been there this morning. It was a warning, aimed directly at me. That night, I got home just after 10:30. I was sitting on my bed, laptop open, trying to force myself to read a 50-page article on Foucault, when my email pinged. It was from a no-reply address, a string of random numbers and letters from an encrypted service. The subject line was only 4 words. Don't take the shortcut. My blood went cold. There was one attachment, an audio file. My fingers were trembling as I plugged in my headphones and clicked play. The quality was terrible, full of static and background noise, like it had been recorded from inside a pocket, but I could hear 2 voices. One was muffled, the other was sharp, with a distinct Port Providence accent. "Just make sure it's done. I don't want excuses." "He'll be there," the second voice said, the man with the slicked back hair, the man with the black lantern ring. "Tell him Friday night, B4. The package arrives. No delays." Friday night, B4. The location, the time, a package, the same garage he warned me about. I ripped my headphones off, my heart hammering. This was evidence. This was real. I ran into the main room. Maribel was highlighting a textbook. "Maribel, you have to hear this." I played it for her. Her face went pale. Eliza, what is this? I got it from an anonymous email. Don't take the shortcut. Mari, that's the B4 garage. That's a drop, a deal, something. Okay, she said, closing her textbook. Okay, delete it. What? No, I have to report it. I'll go to the municipal safety office. They handle property and security standards. This is happening on Atrium property. I was babbling. I knew it. The safety office was a joke, a bureaucratic black hole, but I was terrified of going to the real cops. And say what? Eliza, Maribel stood up, that an anonymous email sent you an illegal recording of two guys you can't identify, one of whom you think you saw wearing a weird ring. They'll laugh you out of the building, or worse, they'll file a report, and that report will get seen by someone who tells the Black Lantern guys that some barista is listening to their private conversations. She put her hands on my shoulders. Listen to me. If this is the Black Lantern outfit that's not just some street gang, they're old bad news. If you're caught between them and Caravella, honestly. She sighed, hating the words she was about to say. The guy who knows the mall's security protocols might be the safer option. I pulled away, infuriated. Safer, Maribel? He's the reason security walked away. He's part of the same system. I am not. I'm not going to be protected by anyone. I am not trading one boss for another. I'm not saying trade, she said softly. I'm saying be smart. You're a grad student, Eliza, not a cop. I went back to my room, my hands shaking with adrenaline and anger. She was wrong. She had to be. I wouldn't let this place, this city, make me that cynical. I wouldn't be a pawn. But Friday night, B4. The words echoed in my head, along with Axton's warning. They know your route. I sat down at my desk, my anger turning into a cold, practical fear. I opened my laptop. I deleted the email. I deleted the audio file. Then I opened a new tab and pulled up the Port Providence bus schedule. I mapped out a new route home, the Harbor Loop 6. It ran late, and it dropped me 8 blocks from my dorm, but it went nowhere near the Skyline Atrium or the waterfront. It was the long way. The next night, I took the Loop 6. The bus was mostly empty, smelling of wet wool and stale cigarettes. I sat near the back, watching the rainy city slide by. At the Piermont stop, a man got on, and he was wearing a simple dark coat and a flat cap. He paid his fare and sat near the front, opening a newspaper. It was in a language I couldn't identify, the letters all sharp angles. Cyrillic, maybe. He turned a page, the paper crinkling, as he did. His eyes flicked up, meeting mine for a fraction of a second in the dark reflection of the window. He looked away instantly, back to his paper. My stomach dropped to the floor. It was him, the impassive face, the man who had been driving Axton Caravella's gray sedan. He was on my new bus, and he was watching my new route. The driver on the Harbor Loop 6 bus last night, he never looked at me again. He just got off at a stop in the warehouse district, a place with no houses and no people, and disappeared into the rain. I'd spent the entire night staring at the ceiling, my paranoia coiling into a tight, cold knot. Axton Caravella wasn't just warning me. He was tracking me. He had taken away my illusion of a new, safe route. Tonight was Friday. The night from the audio file. Friday night, B4. The package arrives. I felt sick. I'd copied the audio file onto a cheap, disposable USB drive and tucked it into my jeans pocket. I didn't know why. Maybe to give to the cops. Maybe to throw in the river. Maybe as a talisman, a piece of evidence that proved I wasn't crazy. I clocked in at 2 p.m. Every time the atrium's main doors hissed open, I flinched. The day shift manager, Nevin, was on. He was a creature of spreadsheets and frantic optimism, blissfully unaware of the shadows that paid his salary. "Eliza, thank goodness," he chirped, wringing his hands. "The regional manager is coming in tomorrow, and our sales numbers are down, like 4%. We need to push the holiday blend. Upsell, upsell." I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. At 8:30, a full 37 minutes before his scheduled 9:07 appearance, Axton Caravella walked up to the counter. The break in his pattern was more alarming than the pattern itself. He wasn't empty-handed. He was carrying a large, heavy cardboard box. He placed it on the counter between us. The logo on the side was for a Breville Barista Pro, an espresso machine with a built-in grinder. It was the exact specific stainless steel model I had been staring at online for 6 months, the one I had on a private Amazon wish list, the one I'd told no one, not even Maribel, about. My blood didn't just run cold, it froze. What is this? I whispered. The other one, he said, gesturing to the new $350 grinder that had arrived after his tip, is for drip. It's loud. We can't accept this, I said, my voice shaking. This must be over $1,000. I accept it. Nevin came bustling over, his eyes wide with joy. Is this a customer donation? Oh, my goodness, sir. Thank you. This will bump our numbers for sure. We can finally do proper espresso. Nevin grabbed a box cutter and started slicing the tape, oblivious to the suffocating tension that was pressing in on me. Axton Caravella hadn't looked at Nevin. His eyes were on me. The noise, he said, his voice a low murmur just for me, was affecting your hearing. I stared at the box, at this impossible, terrifying gift. It wasn't a gift. It was a message. I know what you want. I know where you browse. I know you. And the interference, and I said, my voice just as low, my anger finally giving me a spine, is affecting my self-respect. For the first time, the corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile. It was the barest acknowledgement of a hit, a fencer's salute. He didn't reply. Eliza, help me lift this, Nevin grunted, pulling the machine from its styrofoam cradle. I was so flustered, so furious, that when I turned to grab a cleaning cloth, my elbow knocked a stack of our heavy glass mugs. One of them toppled off the counter and shattered on the tile floor. Damn it, I hissed, kneeling instantly. Nevin, get the dustpan. Oh, careful, he fretted, scurrying to the back. I started picking up the larger shards, my hands trembling with rage. A sharp, jagged piece sliced right through my glove and into the palm of my hand. Ow! I flinched, pulling my hand back. A bright red line of blood welled up instantly, dark against my skin. Before I could even stand, he was there. I hadn't heard him move. He was hunkered down on the outside of the kiosk, his $1,000 suit jacket brushing the dirty floor. He said nothing. He simply held out his hand. In his palm was a small, flat, brushed metal case. It was dark gunmetal gray, and engraved in the corner, in a minimalist, sharp font, were 2 letters, AC. He popped it open with his thumb. Inside, nestled in black velvet, were 2 fabric bandages. I stared at them, then at him. This was an intimacy that felt more violating than a threat. He was offering me a Band-Aid. My hand was dripping. Blood was spotting the clean tile. I hesitated, my pride warring with the simple, practical need. Slowly, I reached out and took one. My fingers brushed his. His skin was warm, his hand steady. I fumbled with the paper wrapper, my hands still shaking. I pressed the bandage over the cut, the simple fabric a stark contrast to the cold, ornate case it came from. Thank you, I muttered, refusing to look at him. I stood up, just as Nevin returned. Oh, dear, are you okay? Eliza, did you get it? I'm fine, I said, pulling my glove back on. And then the world went black. It wasn't a flicker. It was a total, sudden death power cut. The atrium was plunged into absolute darkness. Nevin yelped. I heard a woman scream in the distance. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. A half-second later, the dim orange emergency lights kicked on, casting long, terrifying shadows across the marble floor. The atrium was a tomb, lit by dying embers. Nevin was breathing hard. Oh, goodness, the main breaker. I have to call facilities. He scrambled for his phone, his flashlight beam wobbling frantically. I hadn't moved, but Axton Caravella, I realized, hadn't moved either. He was standing exactly where he'd been when the lights went out. He was just a silhouette against the distant orange glow. He wasn't startled. He wasn't reaching for a phone. He was perfectly, unnaturally still. I realized with a jolt, more comfortable in the dark than he was in the light. He belonged to it. Then, as suddenly as it had vanished, the power surged back on. The main lights hummed, the fountains roared to life, the muzak blared back into existence. Nevin let out a sob of relief. Oh, thank heavens! And in that first bright fluorescent glare, I saw him. Across the way, lingering by the fountain, was the man from 2 nights ago. The man with the slicked-back hair and the cheap leather jacket, the man with the black lantern signet ring. He was looking right at our kiosk. He was looking right at Axton. My blood, which had just started to flow again, turned back to ice. Friday night, B4, the package arrives. I turned to Axton, and he was watching the man, his expression flat, unreadable. The man at the fountain saw Axton see him. He gave a smug, insolent smirk, then turned and sauntered into the crowd, heading for the exit. My hand, inside my pocket, closed around the small, cheap USB drive. Axton turned his gaze back to me. It felt like he was seeing straight through my skin, into my pocket, and reading the data on the drive. "Do you have something you want to give me, Eliza?" he asked. His voice was so quiet, I barely heard him over the resurrected fountain. My God, he knew. He didn't think. He knew. He knew about the email, the audio, the man on the bus. He knew I was a loose thread. I looked at Nevin, who was happily trying to figure out how to plug in the new espresso machine. I looked at the spot where the black lantern man had stood. I looked at the bandage on my hand. Maribel's voice, the safer option. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely get it out of my pocket. I palmed the USB drive, keeping it hidden. "My shift is over," I said to Nevin, my voice cracking. "I'm clocking out." "What? Oh, okay, Eliza. See you tomorrow, and thank you again, sir." I grabbed my bag, my movements jerky, and walked around the counter. I stopped in front of Axton. I didn't look him in the face. I just held out my closed fist. "I just want this atrium to be safe," I whispered, pressing the drive into his hand. It was a plea. His fingers closed around it. He didn't look at it. He slid it into his suit pocket. "Safety," he said, his voice like gravel, "is a form of tax. Miss Tran, that man he doesn't want to pay." The words hung there, cold and transactional. I had just paid my tax. I had to ask, "What are you to this place, to the skyline atrium?" He looked up, past me, at the soaring glass ceiling where the rain was still beating its endless rhythm. "I'm just a man who dislikes chaos." He started to walk away, then stopped. He looked back at me, his face half-shadowed. "It's still Friday. Don't go to B4 tonight." And then he was gone, disappearing into the same private P3 elevator bank. I stood there for a full minute, my legs weak. I looked at the new, gleaming espresso machine. I looked at the bandage on my bleeding hand. I had just handed a piece of criminal evidence to a man they called the Mafia Boss. I finally made it back to my dorm, my mind a screaming void. I had chosen a side. Or had I? I sat on my bed, the quiet of the room deafening, the new machine. It would be quiet. It would run smoothly, tamping down the espresso, steaming the milk, all with a low, expensive hum, like the sound of distant rain. My heart was pounding, a terrible, conflicting rhythm of fear and something else, a dark, terrifying pull. He had seen I was in trouble, and he had helped, but it was the help of a spider, reinforcing the web. My laptop pinged. Another email. Another anonymous, encrypted address. The sender was different from the first time. The subject, the glass bridge. I opened it. The message was 3 lines. "Don't trust Caravella. He's not protecting you. He's claiming you. If you want the real story, be at the Harbor Line Glass Bridge. 11 p.m. Come alone." I looked at the clock. It was 10:15. This was it. This was the third way. The person who sent me the audio or someone else, someone against both Caravella and Black Lantern. I was a pawn. I was being moved around a board I couldn't see. I stood up. I couldn't just hide. I couldn't let Axton Caravella handle it. I couldn't let the Black Lantern scare me into silence. I was a researcher. I studied systems. It was time to stop observing and start pushing. I pulled on my rain jacket and grabbed my keys. I texted Maribel, "Hey, I'm going for a walk. Can you do me a favor? Open the Find my app. Just keep an eye on my dot. Okay." A second later, she replied, "Eliza, what's going on? Where are you going?" "Harbor Line Bridge," I typed. "Just watch me." I put my phone on silent, zipped it into my deepest pocket, and walked out into the rain, my heart beating a frantic, dangerous drum. 11 p.m. I was going to be there. The walk from Riverside Commons to the Harbor Line was only 10 minutes, but the wind coming off the water tried to push me back with every step. The Harbor Line glass bridge isn't for cars. It's a pedestrian walkway, a monument to some forgotten city budget surplus, connecting the old waterfront to the new financial district. At night, it's usually empty. Tonight, it was a tunnel of wind and distorted light. The rain wasn't just falling, it was moving sideways, slamming against the thick glass panels. Below me, the dark, choppy water of the harbor looked angry. My jacket was soaked through in seconds. My phone, safe in my zipped pocket, felt like a small, cold stone, my only lifeline. Maribel. Watching my dot, I checked the time on a public clock tower. 10:58. I was here. He was already there, leaning against the central support beam as if he'd been waiting for hours, as if he owned it. It was him. The man from the atrium. The man with the slicked back hair and the cheap leather jacket that looked stiff in the rain. He was smoking, the cherry of his cigarette a tiny orange beacon in the gloom. He saw me approaching and dropped the cigarette, grinding it out with his heel, the sparks instantly extinguished by the wet. He smiled, a wide, predatory grin that didn't touch his eyes. "Eliza Tran, right on time, punctual, I like that." He spread his hands, a gesture of false welcome. "Silas Vargo, I'm a negotiator for the Black Lantern outfit." "You're the one," I said, my voice tight, trying to control its shaking. "You sent the audio file and the email tonight." "We look out for people," Silas said, stepping closer. I instinctively held my ground, refusing to retreat. "We saw you at the Blue Dock. We saw that live-streaming idiot. We saw the atrium security fold like a cheap suit. And we saw the boss step in. It's a tough spot. Eliza, being claimed by Axton Caravella, that's a heavy price to pay." "I'm not claimed by anyone," I snapped. "No," he chuckled. A low, oily sound. "He bought you a new grinder, didn't he? The expensive one, the one from your wish list?" My breath hitched. My throat closed. He knew about the wish list. He knew. That meant the anonymous email, the first one, the audio file that was him. He had sent it. He had set this all up, playing me. "Caravella thinks he owns this city," Silas continued, his voice dropping. "He thinks he can buy loyalty, buy silence, buy you. But we earn it. We're offering you a better deal. Real protection." "Protection from what?" I said. My words clipped. "From everything. From him. From the past." He let that word hang in the air, heavy and wet. "I don't know what you're talking about." Silas laughed, and the wind seemed to carry the sound away. "Don't you? Let's see. A graduate student transferred up from a state school down south, left quickly, had a little disagreement with a Professor Mark Phillips. A harassment complaint. Very messy. Sealed, even. You sued. You won a little settlement, but you signed an NDA. You just want to get your degree and disappear. Right, you don't want that kind of attention again." Every word was a physical blow. He knew. He knew the one thing I had buried, the one fight I'd fought and won, but which had cost me almost everything. The reason I was in Port Providence, working a dead-end job, trying to rebuild my life in the shadows. "All we're asking for," he said softly, moving into my personal space, "is a little cooperation. You're inside now. You're his new interest. You just listen. You tell us what he says. In exchange, that little past of yours, it stays buried, and the Black Lanterns, we make sure you walk home safe, for real." I looked at him, at his smug, confident face. This was the third way. This wasn't an escape. It was just a different cage, and a dirtier one. No. Silas's smile vanished. The mask of the negotiator dropped. No, Eliza, you're not seeing the board. You think you're safe with him? The atrium security guards, they won't touch the Mafia boss. They're scared of him. He poked a finger at my chest. But we aren't. We'll touch him, and we'll touch anyone he protects. He took a threatening step toward me. I took a step back, my heel hitting the metal girder. The wind howled, rattling the glass panels, a high-pitched scream. And then I heard it. Another sound, a different high-pitched electronic whine. It was getting closer, cutting through the wind. Silas heard it too. He looked up, his eyes scanning the dark sky. What the hell? Thwack! A black object, about the size of a dinner plate, fell out of the sky and shattered on the walkway right at my feet. It was a drone, a quadcopter. Its little propellers were still twitching, broken. A voice boomed out, amplified, seeming to come from the sky itself. This meeting is adjourned. Silas spun around, his hand instinctively going inside his jacket. I looked toward the south end of the bridge, the end that led to the financial district. He was standing there, a silhouette against the city's skyline, Axton Caravella. He was wearing a dark, heavy overcoat, the collar turned up against the wind. He was alone. "Caravella," Silas Vargo shouted, his voice nearly stolen by the gale. He actually laughed. It was a high, manic, unnerving sound. "Look at this, the man himself bringing your heart to a windy bridge. Sir?" He gestured toward me. "You be careful. You might slip. You might drop it." Axton didn't respond to the taunt. He just walked forward, his steps measured, unhurried, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the wet metal. He stopped when he was exactly, I noted, 3 paces from Silas. The air between them crackled, more electric than the storm. "This doesn't concern her," Axton said. His voice wasn't amplified, but it cut through the wind, low and sharp. "Oh, I think it does," Silas sneered. "She's the new variable, the one you noticed, the one you sent your driver to follow on the bus." My stomach turned. He'd seen the driver too. They were watching each other, with me in the middle. "Leave the atrium," Axton said. It wasn't a request, it was a term. "Stop harassing the tenants. Stop interfering with the staff. Take your business back to the South Dock." "And why?" Silas said. "Would I do that?" "In exchange," Axton said, his voice flat. "I'll clear your new container line, the one stuck in customs, the one from Antwerp. It will be on the street by Monday." My mind reeled. A container line. He was trading what illegal goods stolen cars. For me, he was using his power, his network, to clear a path for his rival. Silas actually looked tempted. For a second, his negotiator brain was working, calculating the value. Then his smile returned, colder this time. "No, I don't think so. I think I like the atrium. It's clean. And I think I like this new arrangement better." He reached inside his jacket pocket and pulled out a stack of 4x6 photos. He threw them on the wet pavement between them. My heart stopped. They were pictures of me, walking to the bus stop on the new Harbor Loop 6 route, me leaving my dorm, keys in hand, me wiping down the counter at the Blue Dock, looking exhausted. On the top photo, someone had scrawled in red marker, "Fragile." I felt exposed, violated, sick. Axton's eyes went from the photos to Silas's face. The temperature on the bridge dropped 10 degrees. The air around him went still. He didn't look angry. He looked empty, like a void. He looked at me, and for a second, the mask was gone. I saw something tired. "Eliza, you can go home now. Go home while they negotiated my life, while my pictures, my past, were blowing around their feet." "No," I said. My voice was shaking, but it was loud enough for both of them to hear over the wind. "I'm not leaving. I'm staying. For me." Axton's gaze lingered on me for a fraction of a second. I saw that same, almost imperceptible twitch at his mouth. That salute. He turned his attention back to Silas. In the distance, From the old church in the city, a bell began to toll. Bong, bong. It was 11 o'clock. A vicious gust of wind tore across the bridge, a horizontal wall of water and air. It ripped the photos from the ground, sending them spinning up into the darkness, like dead leaves scattered over the black water. Axton took a half-step forward. Silas instinctively took a half-step back. It was a standoff, a predator's waltz. Then, from the far end of the bridge, from the city side, came a new sound. Whoop, whoop, whoop. The sound of a siren, not a real one, not the PPD. It was the high-low wail of the municipal safety office, the mall cops, the bureaucratic joke. Silas cursed, a sharp, ugly word. He looked past Axton, saw the flashing yellow lights of the approaching patrol car. This isn't over. Caravella. He backed away, then turned and sprinted, running toward the old waterfront side of the bridge. He vaulted over a side railing and disappeared down a maintenance ladder I hadn't even seen. As he vanished, his voice echoed up, "See you at Calder Dock when the tide changes." The municipal safety car pulled up, its spotlight sweeping uselessly over the bridge. 2 officers got out, looking confused and wet. Axton didn't even look at them. He was watching the space where Silas had disappeared. He stood there for a long moment. Then he slowly unbuttoned his heavy wool overcoat. He walked over to me. I was shaking, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline, from the violation of the photos, from the realization of what I was in. He didn't say anything, just draped the coat over my shoulders. It was incredibly heavy, lined with silk, and it smelled faintly of clean wool and something metallic, like the city air itself. It was impossibly warm. "Don't tremble," he said, his voice low, "for men who only borrow the wind." I clutched the coat around me. The safety officers were walking toward us, shining their flashlights. "Hey, sir, what's going on here?" Axton ignored them. "Let's go." He put a hand on my back the first time he had ever touched me and steered me toward the south end of the bridge, away from the officers. They shouted again, but they didn't follow. We walked in silence, the sirens fading behind us. The wind still howled, but inside his coat, I was insulated from it. "How did you know?" I finally asked, my voice muffled by the collar. "How did you know I'd be there?" We reached the street. The gray sedan was waiting, its engine purring, the same driver behind the wheel. Axton opened the back door for me. He looked at me, his face illuminated by the streetlight. "Because you always choose dialogue over violence." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, "you're predictable. You believe you can talk your way out of a problem. That's what they were counting on. It's how they set the trap." He'd known. He'd known Silas sent the email. He'd known I would go. He'd known it was a trap. He hadn't stopped me. He'd just watched and waited. I got in the car. The ride to my dorm was silent. I stared out the window, wrapped in his coat. He didn't try to take it back when I got out. I was walking up the steps to Riverside Commons, my key in my hand, when my phone vibrated. I fumbled for it, my hands still shaking. It wasn't Maribel. The caller ID was from the university. "Hello." "Miss Eliza Tran, this is Rector Hale, from the Port Providence Institute of Media Ethics." Rector Hale, the director of the entire institute? I'd never spoken to him in my life. "Yes, sir." "Miss Tran, I was just reviewing your file and your dissertation proposal on, let's see, community-level media ethics and non-state actors. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. We have a growing problem with labor security in the new live streaming era, and your work, it's timely. I'd like you to come to my office tomorrow, 10 a.m. We need to talk about this." I stood there on the steps, the rain dripping off me, my mind blank. Tomorrow. "Yes, a concerned benefactor of the university brought your work to my attention. Said you had some recent field experience. 10 a.m. Miss Tran, don't be late." He hung up. I stared at my phone. A concerned benefactor. Recent field experience. Someone had pushed my file. Someone had taken my obscure academic research and put it on the rector's desk, reframing it as a labor security issue. Someone had just turned my thesis into a weapon, and I had a terrifying, sinking feeling I knew who it was. The first thing I did when I got back to my dorm was take off his coat, the heavy, warm wool, still smelling of the city and that faint, clean, metallic scent. I laid it on my chair, a dark, heavy presence in my tiny room. I had been reeling from Rector Hale's call, and now, holding the coat, I understood. Axton Caravella hadn't just saved me on the bridge. He hadn't just shown up. He had repositioned me. My dissertation wasn't just a student paper anymore. It was a timely analysis of labor security. I wasn't just a barista who saw too much. I was a scholar with recent field experience. He hadn't just given me a coat. He'd given me armor. He'd taken my academic theories about non-state power structures and made them relevant to the actual state. The 10 a.m. meeting with Rector Hale was surreal. He didn't ask about the bridge. He didn't ask about the atrium. He asked about my thesis. This concept of a power vacuum in public commercial spaces. It's brilliant. Miss Tran, truly, the concerned benefactor who flagged your file was right. You're onto something. He was using my own words, the ones I'd written months ago, to describe the thing I had just lived. I walked out of his office with a new, funded research grant and a dazed, sick feeling I had been laundered. It was when I stopped for a coffee not at the atrium, never there again, off shift, that I saw the headline on the Harbor Ledger newsstand. IFCB launches probe into Port Providence night logistics. My blood turned to ice water. It was the front page. The article was vague, citing anonymous tips and financial irregularities in customs data. It didn't name the Caravella Consortium. It didn't name the Black Lantern outfit. But it didn't have to. The USB drive, the audio file I had given him, he hadn't just listened to it. He'd aimed it. He hadn't sent it to the local cops. He'd sent it to the feds. He'd used my anonymous tip to start a fire, one big enough to burn his rivals, but one he clearly thought he could control. The city, which had felt stable and solid, was suddenly a sheet of thin ice, and Axton Caravella was the one deciding where to step. The fallout was immediate. By the time I got to my 2 p.m. shift at the Blue Dock, the entire atrium was vibrating with tension. The mall manager, Nevin, wasn't at the kiosk. He was in the glass-walled management office, pacing. "Eliza," he squeaked, running out when he saw me. "You're here, thank goodness. Have you seen the memo from the MCA?" The MCA, the Metropolitan Commerce Authority. They're in a panic over the IFCB probe. They're trying to cover themselves. They just sent a new directive. All tenants, all of us have to upgrade our security. Upgrade how? Full spectrum cameras, audio recording, and he looked like he was going to be sick. Data retention of 90 days, 90 Eliza. The server cost alone will be out of business. The Blue Dock will close. I'll be... Nevin, a calm voice said. We both froze. Axton Caravella was standing behind us. He wasn't in his usual suit. He was wearing dark trousers and a fine-gauge charcoal sweater. Casual, for him. Which was somehow more terrifying. "This is a tenant management meeting, sir," Nevin stammered, his eyes wide. I don't think... "I'm aware," Axton said. He gestured to the glass office, where 2 other men in expensive suits were waiting, looking grim. They're waiting for us. Nevin and I exchanged a look of pure confusion. Us? Axton looked at me. "You're the subject of the original security failure. Your testimony is relevant." He looked at Nevin. "And you're the tenant representative. Let's go." It wasn't a request. We sat in the cold, sterile office. The 2 suits were the atrium's owners. They looked stressed. This 90-day retention is an outrage. The older suit, a man named Davies, snapped. It's an illegal overreach by the MCA. We'll fight it in court. Axton, who had taken a seat in the corner as if he were just an observer, spoke for the first time. He wasn't a shareholder. He was just there, like a fact. "Mr. Davies," he said, his voice quiet, What is the atrium's current insurance liability policy regarding tenant safety and employee harm Section 4B? I believe... Davies froze. His face went pale. Because, Axton continued, if an employee, say, Miss Tran, were to file a civil suit for failure to protect, citing the original incident with the streamer and then the subsequent incident in the garage, your liability would be significant. That's... Davies sputtered. And what is the MCA's standard penalty for non-compliance with a Class A security directive? Axton pressed on, his voice still conversational. Is it a fine, Mr. Davies, or is it grounds for immediate business license suspension? Given the current IFCB probe, I wonder how aggressive they're feeling. I watched, mesmerized. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't threatened anyone. He hadn't issued a single command. He'd just asked questions. He'd laid out the legal and financial traps so perfectly that Davies had no choice but to walk into it. He was using the law as his weapon. He was forcing the atrium to upgrade its own security, to make it harder for groups like the Black Lanterns to operate on his turf. Davies deflated. I'll call our vendor. We'll comply. Silas Fargo's counterattack came 12 hours later. I was in the dorm library when Maribel ran in, her face white. Eliza, you need to see this. She slammed her laptop on the table. It was a video, already going viral on a local gossip site. The title, Skyline Barista, the mob's newest asset. He'd done it. Silas had taken the original streamer's footage, the part where I was smiling at a different customer, and cut it right next to Axton stepping in. Then, he'd spliced in grainy, zoomed in footage from the garage, the part where Axton's sedan pulled up to rescue me. Out of context, it didn't look like a rescue. It looked like a pickup, a clandestine meeting. The clip ended with the photo of me he'd thrown on the bridge, the one with fragile scrawled on it. The comment section was a sewer. Gold digger, she's obviously with him. That's Axton Caravella. My dad told me about him. She's playing with fire. She probably set up the streamer guy herself to get his attention. I'm a media student at PPIME. That's her. She's in my program. Disgusting. My hands were shaking. This was my past. This was the harassment I'd fought so hard to escape, starting all over again. But this time, it was public. My phone rang, unknown number. I picked it up, walked to a private study room, and shut the door. Hello? My legal team, Axton's voice said, no greeting, can have that video and its host server scrubbed from the internet in 1 hour. I closed my eyes. The offer was so tempting. To make it all just go away, to let him clean it up. But this was my name. This was my field. No, I said, my voice shaking but firm. Silence on the other end. You can't scrub an idea, Mr. Caravella, I said, finding my strength. If I'm silent, it looks like I'm guilty. This is a media attack. I'm going to refute it with a media response. Publicly. He was quiet for a long time. I could hear his breathing. As you wish, he said, and hung up. I immediately called Maribel's friend, the one who ran the independent Night Watch Providence podcast. Leo, it's Eliza Tran. I need to come on your show tonight. 3 hours later, I was in a tiny basement studio, a microphone in front of me. Leo, the host, looked nervous. Eliza, this clip is heavy. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said. But we're not going to talk about the clip. We're not going to talk about him. We're going to talk about the guards. And I did, for 30 minutes. I laid out my thesis. I told the story of that first night, of pressing the button, and of the 2 men in uniform walking away. This isn't about one man, I said, my voice clear and steady. This is about a structural failure. We put minimum wage security personnel in a position where they have to make an impossible choice, their job or their personal safety. We have created a power vacuum in our public spaces, and when that happens, we can't be surprised when someone else steps in to fill it. The phrase, "we don't interfere," is not a personal failure, Leo. It's a policy failure. The system is broken. The podcast dropped at midnight. By morning, it was the #1 topic in Port Providence. "We don't interfere" was trending. It wasn't just me. Retail workers from other malls, waitresses from downtown restaurants, nurses from the private hospitals, they all started sharing their own stories of being told not to interfere when a powerful person was involved. I had entirely by accident given a voice to the entire city's service industry, and the feds had listened. The next day, a formal, embossed envelope was delivered to my dorm. The Interstate Financial Crimes Bureau, IFCB, cordially invites Miss Eliza Tran to provide a voluntary statement as a civilian witness to their ongoing investigation. Eliza, Maribel said, her law student brain kicking in. Civilian witness is code. They don't have enough to charge anyone with anything real, so they're on a fishing expedition. This is a deposition, but they're trying to get you in a room without a lawyer. Don't go. I have to. Mari, this is the system. It's the right thing to do. Is it? She countered. Or is it just a different windy bridge? The unknown number call came an hour later. You accepted the invitation, he stated. It wasn't a question. It's my civic duty, as I said, gripping the phone. A long, heavy sigh. When you walk into that room, Eliza, you will find two types of people. There are those who need the truth and those who need a hostage. Be very sure you know which one you're talking to. He hung up. A hostage. He meant they'd use my testimony, my story about the security failure to build a case they wanted. A case that could, perhaps, lead to him. I sat there, my mind racing. He was right, so I'd need insurance. I called the IFCB agent on the letter. I'll be there, I said, but I have one condition. My research, which you're probably aware of, is about institutional transparency. Therefore, I require the session to be available via a secure internal stream to the Metropolitan Commerce Authority for their own review of the atrium's security failures. The agent on the other end was silent. I had just tied his federal investigation to the city's bureaucratic headache. He couldn't refuse without looking like he was hiding something. That is highly irregular, Miss Tran. These are irregular times. I said, that's my condition. We'll accommodate. The morning of the meeting, a small box was delivered to the dorm. No card. Inside, on a bed of black tissue, were 3 stems of blue lilies. They were a deep, impossible electric blue. Okay, that's him, Maribel said, peering at them. Definitely him. Creepy, beautiful, and weirdly sad. I wasn't sure. They didn't feel like him. They didn't feel like a transaction. As I was walking into the federal building, my suit jacket feeling stiff, my phone buzzed with a text, unknown number. The tide changes tonight. Calder Dock, Silas's threat from the bridge, but this was Axton's message. He was telling me the stage was set. I walked into the conference room. It was all polished wood and brushed steel, 3 agents, a tape recorder. I sat down, folded my hands, and looked at the small, black webcam that confirmed my feed was going to the MCA. And I did exactly what I had practiced. I didn't speculate. I didn't name names. I didn't mention the Black Lanterns. And I never, ever said the name Caravella. I just told my story. The issue began with a systemic failure of on-site security. For 45 minutes, I presented my thesis, using my own harassment as the core case study. I talked about the failure of policy, the lack of training, and the creation of a power vacuum. The agents were visibly frustrated. Miss Tran, we're not here to discuss your dissertation. We're here to discuss the criminal elements you've observed. Agent, I said, I'm not a police officer. I'm a researcher. What I observed was a structural gap. The atrium's failure to provide a safe environment created a vacuum. And in a vacuum, any non-state actor, any entity will step in to provide their own version of order. The atrium's failure didn't just allow chaos, it invited it. I had given them nothing and everything. When it was over, I walked out, my knees shaking but my head high. I'd survived. I pushed through the heavy glass doors onto the plaza. He was there, Silas Vargo, and he was leaning against the hood of a shiny black Camaro, parked in a no-parking zone right in front of the federal building. He was wearing a better suit. He was evolving. He saw me, and he started to clap. A slow, loud, rhythmic clap that echoed off the granite walls. "Nice speech, girl," he called out, a venomous smile spreading across his face. "You really think you're in charge, don't you?" He pushed off the car and started walking toward me. "You just talked yourself into a war you can't win." I walked away from the federal building. Silas Vargo's slow, mocking applause echoing in my ears, his final words. "You just talked yourself into a war you can't win," felt like a physical weight, settling on my shoulders alongside the damp Port Providence air. I didn't go back to the dorm. I couldn't. My mind was a racetrack. Thoughts colliding and spinning out, the podcast, the IFCB, the rector, the video, Silas, and underneath it all, Axton. He was a ghost in the machine, a hand I couldn't see. Pushing pieces around a board I was just beginning to understand. I had used my thesis, my words, as a shield in that hearing, but it was a shield he had implicitly handed me. I just walked. The city's power grid was unstable. Still recovering from the storm, the streetlights would flicker, buzzing angrily before stuttering into darkness for a few seconds, then surging back to a sickly orange. The rain was a fine, cold mist that clung to everything. I found myself walking toward the waterfront, my feet carrying me on a familiar, doomed path. I ended up at the Skyline Atrium. It was late, almost 10. The main doors were locked. I stood outside in the rain, looking in. The great glass hall was dark, almost empty. A few cleaning carts were parked like abandoned vehicles. And then I saw him. He was inside the Blue Dock kiosk, alone. He wasn't in a suit. He was wearing the same charcoal sweater and dark trousers from the management meeting. He was wiping cups. He had a clean, white cloth. And he was methodically polishing the glass mugs, the ones I'd knocked over and broken, and lining them up on the counter. The motions were slow, precise, almost meditative. He wasn't the mafia boss. He wasn't the consortium. He was just a man, alone in a dark mall, cleaning. I don't know why I did it. I walked to the employee entrance, swiped the card I hadn't yet returned, and the lock clicked open. The sound of my footsteps on the marble floor was loud in the empty atrium. He stopped wiping, but he didn't turn around. He knew it was me. He must have seen my reflection in the dark glass. I stopped a few feet from the kiosk. "They're closing the kiosk," I asked, my voice sounding small. "No," he said, his back still to me. "Nevin left in a panic after the MCA directive. The night crew, they missed this." He placed the last cup down. He turned, slowly, and leaned back against the counter. He looked tired. The scar on his cheekbone was a pale line in the dim light. "You were good today," he said. "In the hearing, you used the MCA feed as a counter lever. It was smart. You knew I'd do it." "I knew you'd find a way to protect yourself," he corrected. We stood there in the heavy, silent air, the only sound the hum of the drink coolers. "Are you afraid of me, Eliza?" he asked. His voice was low, stripped of its usual command. It was just a question. I thought about it. I thought about the driver on the bus, the grinder from my wish list, the drone on the bridge. I thought about the way the guards had abandoned me. "No," I said, and I was surprised to find it was the truth. "I'm not afraid of you." I took a step closer. "I'm afraid of how you know things, how you knew I'd go to the bridge, how you knew about Rector Hale, how you knew about my thesis. I'm afraid of how you seem to know what I'm going to do before I do." He looked down at the cloth in his hands, folding it into a neat square. "When I was a kid," he said, his voice quiet, "I was left at Barrow Pier. Just left. I didn't have a name. I didn't have anything." My breath caught. This wasn't what I expected. The men who worked the docks, the night logistics crews, they took me in. I slept in a storage room on a cot made of packing blankets. I learned to read from shipping manifests, and I learned... He looked up, and his eyes were dark. Not with malice, but with a history I couldn't imagine. I learned that to survive, you couldn't just react. You had to see it coming. You had to know which man was going to get drunk and violent. You had to know which crate was unstable. You had to know which tide was going to be too high. He set the cloth on the counter. Being one step ahead, it's not a game for me, Eliza. It's not about power. It's just how I learned to breathe. It's the only reason I'm still here. He had just handed me his entire past, his entire self, the orphan from the pier, hiding in the shadows, watching, always watching. I felt my own defenses crack. My mother, I said, my voice suddenly thick. She worked the night shift at a textile mill. For almost 20 years. She'd come home in the morning, smelling of industrial oil and bleach. She was always tired, always. And she told me, Eliza, you get an education. You use your mind, so you never have to use your body to survive. I looked at him, really seeing him for the first time. So I did. I got to college, I was smart, and this professor, he didn't care about my mind. He saw me as just a body, like my mother. So I fought him. I filed the complaint. I did everything right. And you won, he said. No, I whispered. I won, but they buried me. They sealed the record. They made me the problem. I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement just to get my transcripts. I came here to Port Providence to start over, to be invisible. And then a guy with a camera and you and Silas, we were the same. Both of us products of the night shift, of the shadows. Both of us wrapped in armor we'd built to hide the fact that we were, as Silas's photo said, fragile. The main lights in the atrium buzzed, flickered, and went out. This time, the emergency lights didn't kick on. The city's grid had finally given up. We were plunged into an absolute, profound darkness. The silence was total. The only light was the faint, watery, yellow glow from the streetlights on Piermont, filtering through the 3-story wall of rain-streaked glass. It was beautiful. I couldn't see him. I could just feel his presence. A pocket of warmth in the cold. Eliza, he said. His voice was a low vibration, seeming to come from the dark itself. I heard a single, soft footstep on the tile. He was closer. I still couldn't see his face, just a tall, broad silhouette against the distant, rainy light. He stopped, still a few feet away from me, that careful, respectful distance he always kept. My heart was hammering. I could hear my own pulse in the silence. "May I touch you?" he asked. The question stunned me. This man who moved container lines and federal investigations, who commanded drivers and lawyers, who knew my Amazon wish list, he was asking for permission. I couldn't find my voice. I just nodded, a small, jerky motion in the dark. He stepped forward. I didn't flinch. He didn't reach for my face or my waist. He slowly, gently laid his hand over mine, where it was resting on the cold marble counter. His hand was warm, solid, sure. It wasn't a grab. It wasn't a claim. It was a connection, a quiet, steady anchor in the dark. I could feel the faint, steady rhythm of his pulse against my skin, my own pulse, in answer. Felt like a trapped bird. The air smelled of rain and the rich, dark scent of the coffee beans in the open grinder. I turned my hand over, my fingers instinctively lacing with his. It was my move. I took the last step. I was so tired of being strong, of fighting, of being one step ahead. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding since I first saw him. And I leaned forward, resting my forehead against his chest. Against the soft, fine wool of his sweater, I could hear his heart. A low, steady drumbeat. Thump, 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 thump. I closed my eyes, just for a second, and his other hand came up, very slowly, and rested on my back, between my shoulder blades. It just stayed there, a solid, protective weight. He didn't pull me closer, and he didn't try for more. He just held me. He held me as if I was the secret, as if I was the one thing he hadn't seen coming. We stood like that for a long time, just breathing. I tilted my head back. In the almost dark, I could just make out the line of his jaw, the shadow of his scar. His eyes were fixed on mine. The kiss was slow. It started with a question, a hesitation. His lips brushed mine, a shadow of a touch, asking, waiting. I met him. I closed the last final millimeter. It wasn't a kiss of fire. It was a kiss of recognition. It was a kiss that tasted like the rain and the dark. It was the feeling of being seen, completely. The orphan from the pier and the girl from the mill. His breath was warm, his hand still solid on my back, his other hand still laced with mine. It was the safest, most profound, most real thing I had ever felt. He wasn't taking. He was sharing. He was choosing. And then the power surged. The lights in the atrium blazed to life, a sudden, brutal, fluorescent white. The muzak blasted on, a jarringly cheerful pop song. We sprang apart, like guilty teenagers. I felt a hot blush creep up my neck. I couldn't look at him. I stared, suddenly fascinated, at the new espresso machine, its little green on light now glowing. I heard him clear his throat, and then a sound I had never, ever heard. A low, soft chuckle. I looked at him. The corner of his mouth was turned up, not in a twitch, but in a real, faint smile. "You made me forget the tide," he said, his voice rough. I looked at him, at this impossible, dangerous, gentle man. My heart, which had been a trapped bird, now felt like it was soaring. "Then don't let the tide take me," I whispered. The smile faded, replaced by that familiar, deep intensity. He held out his hand. This time, I didn't hesitate. I took it. He led me out of the kiosk, his hand holding mine firmly, and we walked through the main doors into the misty rain. The gray sedan was nowhere to be seen. We were just walking, like two normal people. "The blend you were using," he said, as we crossed the empty street. "The holiday one. It has too much Robusta. It throws off the balance." I looked at him, surprised. "It's the cocoa notes," I argued, playing along. "Nevin insists they're festive. I think they taste dusty." "Dusty," he agreed, and I saw that faint smile again. "That's the word." We were talking about coffee. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I let go of his hand, a small pang of loss, and pulled it out. It was a text, an unknown number. It was a picture. My blood turned to ice. It was Maribel. She was walking, her back to the camera, headphones in, her law books clutched to her chest. She was on the path by the Riverside Commons Library, oblivious. And on the brick wall behind her, spray painted in fresh, wet black paint, was the crude, unmistakable symbol of a single, dark lantern. I must have made a sound. Axton stopped. He looked at my face, and his entire demeanor, the warmth, the ease it vanished. He was the man from the bridge again. He took the phone from my trembling hand. He looked at the picture. He didn't swear. He didn't react. He just absorbed it. Then he pulled out his own phone. He hit one button. "Activate protocol harbor glass, he said, his voice cold and hard as steel. "Ochoa, Maribel Ochoa, Riverside Commons. Now, secure her. Move." He was listening. Then, "No, she's not a package. Escort her, and find the man who took the picture." He snapped the phone shut. I was staring at him, horrified. "Protocol harbor glass what, Axton? What's happening?" "They're moving," he said, his hand taking my elbow, steering me toward the curb. The gray sedan glided around the corner, appearing as if summoned from the rain itself. "They know you were at the IFCB. They know you're with me. They're trying to find a new lever. They've just confirmed the meeting." The driver opened the door. He looked at me, his eyes hard, not with anger at me, but at them. The tide, Calder Dock, sunrise. He got in the car after me, his hand resting on my knee, a solid, protective weight. "This time," he said, as the car sped into the night, "it's not a threat, it's an invitation, for both of us." I spent the 4 hours before dawn in a state of suspended animation. Protocol harbor glass had been terrifyingly efficient. A quiet woman in a dark gray uniform had met me and Axton at the curb, taken me to an apartment, a high-end corporate suite I'd never seen, owned by a holding company I didn't recognize, and simply said, "You are secure here." Another team, Axton had assured me in a brief, cold text message, had secured Maribel. They had moved her from the dorm before she even saw the black lantern symbol. She was safe. She was at a different, undisclosed location. So I sat on a sofa that cost more than my car, watching the rain-streaked window. My heart a cold, heavy stone. I wasn't his hostage. I was his guest, a protected asset. The text from Axton came at 4:30 a.m. Tide changes tonight, and a second cryptic message right after. 3 blasts. Wait for the light. At 5:15, the gray sedan was waiting downstairs, the same silent driver. He didn't take me to my dorm. He took me to the waterfront. Calder Dock was a different world from the Skyline Atrium. This was the real Port Providence. A sprawling maze of rust-colored cranes, stacks of shipping containers that looked like sleeping giants, and the smell of low tide, diesel, and dead fish. The sky was a bruised, watery purple. Not yet dawn. The rain had softened to a cold, clinging mist. The sedan stopped at the main gate. The driver just nodded. He said you would walk from here. I stepped out into the damp, and I was alone. I walked onto the long concrete pier. The tide was slack, the dark water oily and still. This was the place Silas had named, the place Axton had confirmed, an invitation for both of us. But he wasn't here. A figure detached itself from the shadows of a loading crane. It wasn't Silas. It was the woman from the atrium, the one with the elegant silver hair, the one who had taken the envelope from the Black Lantern Man. "Miss Tran," she said. Her voice was surprisingly deep, with an accent I couldn't place. Eastern European, maybe. "You are punctual. I am Marta Judas. I serve as an intermediary for the port." "Where is he?" I asked, my voice flat. "Where is Axton?" "Mr. Caravella is detained," she said smoothly. "He trusts me to handle the preliminary arrangements. He sends his apologies. He wants to ensure you are safe." She held up a small, leather-bound folder. "This is a formality. Given your testimony at the IFCB and the ongoing situation, we are placing you under official witness protection, sponsored by the Port Authority." She opened the folder. Inside was a single, official-looking document. The letterhead was there. The imposing eagle of the Interstate Financial Crimes Bureau, IFCB Witness Protection Agreement. "Just sign here," she said, offering me a pen. I looked at the paper. It was thick. It looked right. I just spent 48 hours steeped in federal bureaucracy. This was my way out. My mind screamed at me to sign it, to be safe, to be protected by the system, not by him. I took the pen. My hand hovered over the signature line. Given the sensitivity Marta was saying, this document will be sealed. I stopped. I looked closer. The ink on the letterhead, it was just a little too bright, and where the fold of the paper was, the ink had smeared just a tiny, tiny bit. This wasn't engraved letterhead. This was printed on a very good, but not perfect, laser printer. This was a fake. I looked at Marta Judas. "I have a few questions about the data clauses," I said, my heart suddenly hammering a fast, cold rhythm. Section 3, Data Retention and Interagency Sharing. I need to read it aloud for my records. Marta's eye twitched. "That is not necessary." "Oh, but it is," I said, my voice shaking but my mind sharp. I was stalling. As a media ethics scholar, I'm very particular. "I don't think," a new voice snarled from behind me, "that we have time for a reading." Silas Vargo stepped out from behind a stack of oil drums. He wasn't alone. 2 large, heavy-set men in dark hoodies flanked him. They looked like the men from the B4 garage. Marta Judas didn't look surprised. She just sighed, closing her folder. He was right. You do always choose dialogue. It was a trap, a 3-person trap. Marta, Silas, and the 2 thugs. "So," Silas sneered, stepping right up to me, his breath hot and sour. "Still like dialogue over violence. Eliza still think you can talk your way out." "The IFCB," I started. The IFCB, Silas laughed, is a mile away, drowning in paperwork. They don't run this dock. They don't run this city. We do. And you and Caravella, you've become a problem. He nodded to one of his men. Get her. The man lunged, and at that exact second, the world was split apart by a sound. Bwah! A deafeningly loud tugboat horn. It echoed off the containers, vibrating in my bones. Bwah! A second blast. Silas and his men flinched, looking out toward the dark water. Bwah! 3 blasts. Wait for the light. What the hell is that? Silas yelled. That, I said, my voice shaking, is the light. On top of the container stack to our left, a massive industrial floodlight snapped on, bathing the pier in a white, sterile glare. Then another, and another. Suddenly, from the gaps between the containers, from the cranes, from the storage sheds, they came. They weren't thugs. They weren't cops. They were men and women in dark blue rain gear and yellow hard hats, dock workers, longshoremen, and they were all holding cameras, professional-grade HD cameras, their bright LED lights all snapped on at once, turning the pier into a movie set. We are live, a man with a bullhorn announced, his voice booming. This is the feed for the Maritime Safety Volunteers. We are documenting an ongoing safety violation at Calder Dock. Silas was frozen. He looked at the cameras, at the lights. He was trapped. He was in the light. He did the only thing a cornered animal could do. He lunged for me. He grabbed my arm, yanking me in front of him, his other arm snaking around my throat. Turn them off, he screamed, his voice raw with panic. Turn them off, or she... I didn't let him finish. I wasn't the girl from the streamer incident. Maribel's voice. From a self-defense class she'd dragged me to. The target is the nerve. The weapon is anything hard. Go for the ribs. Go for the wrist. I slammed my head back into his nose. I heard a wet crack and he howled, his grip loosening just enough. I didn't have a keychain. I had my keys. I jammed them, sharp end first, hard into his side, just below the ribcage. He shrieked, a high-pitched animal sound, and his arms flew open. I scrambled away, falling to the wet concrete, out of his reach. Get her, he screamed at his 2 men, blood pouring from his nose. The 2 thugs moved, but they stopped. A small, sleek pilot's boat had glided up to the pier, its engine silent. Axton Caravella stepped off it. He landed on the concrete as lightly as a cat, not even rippling the water. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing dark jeans, boots, and a black high-collared jacket. He looked like he belonged here. He looked like the pier itself. He didn't look at me. He walked calmly towards Silas, who was clutching his bleeding face. The 2 thugs stepped in front of Silas, trying to form a wall. Axton didn't stop. He didn't pull a weapon. He didn't raise his hands. He just reached into his jacket and pulled out a single, folded piece of paper. He held it up. It was a photocopy. Even from where I was, I could see the lines of a shipping manifest, and at the bottom, a sprawling, arrogant signature. This, Axton said, his voice a low, cold vibration that the cameras picked up perfectly, is the manifest for the Antwerp container line, the one I cleared for you, the one, Silas, that you signed for personally, the one filled with, what was it, Belgian machine parts. Silas's eyes went wide with terror. The IFCB, Axton continued, has a copy. They are very interested in your machine part. They seem to think there's something else. He had done it. He hadn't just used the USB to start a vague probe. He had set up Silas. He'd given him the container line on the bridge Part 4 knowing Silas was greedy enough to sign for it. And then he'd handed the feds the proof. Silas looked around, frantic, like a rat in a cage of light. He looked at Marta. Marta, do something, call them off. Marta Giudice, who had been watching this all unfold with a cold, appraising look, finally moved. She stepped away from Silas. She walked over and stood near me, by the cameras. I am tired, she said, her voice clear and carrying, of paying your tax. "Silas, you bring chaos. You bring light, bad for business." She had betrayed him. The intermediary had chosen a side. Whoop, whoop, whoop! The sound of sirens. This time, it was the yellow and white cars of the Municipal Safety Office. Just as before, they screeched to a halt at the gate outside the pier. 2 officers got out, looked at the cameras, at the dock workers, at Axton, and stayed by their car. Just as I had said in my podcast, just as I'd told the IFCB, jurisdictional overlap, they wouldn't interfere. Silas saw it all. He saw the betrayal. He saw the cameras. He saw the useless cops. He saw Axton holding the paper that would ruin him. He screamed, a wordless sound of pure rage, and ripped something from his belt. He threw it down. Clack, clack, clack. A smoke grenade. Thick, gray smoke billowed out, instantly obscuring everything. "Move!" Axton yelled. I heard footsteps, Silas and his 2 men running, disappearing into the maze of containers. I scrambled to my feet, my eyes stinging. "He's getting away!" Axton's hand grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "Don't follow into the smoke," he commanded, his voice urgent. "It's a delay fuse." A what? A small, sharp pop came from the direction of container row C. It was followed by the loud, groaning snap of metal. A small, contained explosion. It hadn't hurt anyone, but it had snapped 2 of the crane's main anchoring cables. It was a distraction. Chaos. Just enough to cover his escape. The smoke began to clear. The sun was finally breaking the horizon, turning the mist and the remaining smoke a pale, sickly gray. The volunteers were still filming. They had captured everything. The fake document, the assault, the confrontation, the manifest, the escape. On a dozen different live feeds, the entire city had just watched the Black Lantern outfit implode. The hashtag, I'd learn later, was already trending. Black Lanterns off. Axton turned to me. His face was grim, his eyes tracking the container maze where Silas had vanished. But his fight was over. He had won. He had used information, leverage, and light. He looked at me, my clothes damp, my hands shaking, my keys still clutched like a weapon. "This is your battle, Eliza," he said, his voice low. "You started it with a phone call. Now finish it." He nodded toward the cameras. "You wanted to fix the system. You wanted them to see the structural failure. Show them." I looked at the cameras of the maritime volunteers. I looked at the hesitant, useless cops still standing at the gate. I looked at Axton, the man who operated in the shadows but who had just engineered a victory in the brightest light possible. He was right. I pulled out my own phone. My hands were trembling, but my purpose was clear. I opened my social media. I hit go live. I held the phone up, my own face filling the screen, the chaotic, smoky dock behind me. "My name is Eliza Tran," I said, my voice shaking but strong. "I'm a graduate student, and I'm a barista at the Skyline Atrium. And this all started because I pressed a button. It started when I called security. I was going to tell them. I was going to tell them everything." My live stream from Calder Dock did what my academic paper never could. It put a face to the structural failure. It wasn't just a theory, it was me. My voice shaking, my keys still in my hand, with a smoking, sabotaged pier behind me. The Black Lanterns Off hashtag had exploded, and the Maritime Safety Volunteers footage was on every local news channel. The city was finally, irrevocably awake. The fallout was a tactical explosion. The real IFCB, not the fake letterhead version, contacted me within hours. The agent on the phone sounded exhausted. "Miss Tran," he said, "it seems your analysis from yesterday was prescient. Your live stream has provided context our investigation was lacking." He didn't thank me, and he didn't apologize. He made me an offer. "We're forming a task force with the MCA to address these security gaps in commercial spaces. They want to build a new safe intervention rulebook. Given your expertise, they'd like to retain you as a short-term community consultant, a paid contract." I had just been offered a job by the feds to write the very rules I had been screaming were broken. The second meeting was in the same glass-walled office at the Skyline Atrium, but this time I wasn't an employee. I was a paid consultant. Nevin was there, looking like he'd aged 10 years. Mr. Davies, the owner, was there, looking pale. And Axton was there. He wasn't a concerned benefactor or a shadowy shareholder today. He was introduced simply as Mr. Caravella, representing the primary investors for the Atrium's new security initiative. He was stepping out of the shadows, just a little. The MCA has designated the Skyline Atrium as the pilot location for this new program, the agent said, which means a complete overhaul, new scanners, new training, new protocols. Davies sputtered. The funding after the incident at Calder Dock, our insurance premiums, we can't. The funding is secured, Axton said, his voice flat. All eyes turned to him. My consortium will finance the entire upgrade, the new scanners, the servers, the training, all of it. Davies looked relieved. The IFCB agent looked suspicious. With 3 conditions, Axton continued, his gaze steady. 1. The data from these new systems, every camera feed, every audio log will not be held by the Atrium, and it will not be held by my consortium. He looked directly at me. It will be managed exclusively by a new independent community oversight committee. Who would be on this committee? The agent asked. Axton nodded toward me. Miss Tran can chair it. She can select the other members from the community, tenants, labor representatives, even academics. He was handing the keys to me. 2, he said. My condition. Miss Tran, I require all committee meetings, all decisions, all minutes to be made public, in real time. I met his gaze. He was taking my thesis and making it law. Agreed, I said. Public minutes. And 3, Axton said, his voice dropping. My consortium's name and my name will not appear on any donor lists, press releases, or building plaques associated with this project. This is not a donation. It is a structural repair. He was paying for the light, but he was refusing to stand in it. The victory felt huge. It felt real. It lasted for exactly 2 days. I was at the safe house the volunteers had provided a clean, anonymous apartment in a building full of dock worker families. Maribel was there, her law firm, the high-powered one she'd been so proud to intern for, had been pressured. They didn't fire me, she said, pacing the small living room. They just my access card stopped working. The partners won't return my calls. They said I'm associated with an ongoing federal investigation. The Black Lanterns. Eliza, they aren't just thugs. They're in the system. The text message arrived on my phone at 8 p.m. A new, unknown number. It was 5 words. Tonight, B4, you alone. My blood stopped. I knew the location, the garage where it all began. A second text came a minute later. It was a picture, the same picture of Maribel from before, with the Black Lantern symbol painted on the wall, but this time, a new message was painted underneath it. Or we find her again. And this time, we don't just take a picture. It was an ultimatum. Silas was cornered, his operations in flames, his name tied to a federal probe. He had nothing left to lose, and he was going after the only thing I had. I have to go, I said, my voice a whisper. Eliza, no. Maribel grabbed my arm. That's how they get you. You call Axton. You call the feds. The feds who sat in their car at Calder Dock. The feds who are using me as a consultant. They can't protect you. Marie, they can't protect me. I called Axton. I know, was the first thing he said. His voice was cold. My team intercepted the message. You will not go. He's threatening Maribel. Axton, this isn't a game. This isn't a thesis paper. It's a trap. Eliza. His voice was sharp, urgent. He's desperate. His entire network is collapsing. He can't win in the light anymore. He's trying to pull you back into the dark, where he can... Then I'll bring the light to B4, I said, the plan forming in my mind, fast and clear. You said it yourself. He's desperate. He's predictable. He expects me to be alone. He expects me to be scared. He expects me to be with you, Axton countered, and he'll be ready for that. No, I said, pacing. He expects you, the Mafia boss. He'll be ready for your men, your cars, your shadows. He won't be ready for me. He won't be ready for the Community Oversight Committee." "What are you talking about?" The Maritime Volunteers," I said, my heart hammering. "They're my new committee. We'll use the new atrium rules. We'll conduct a safety audit. Tonight, now. We'll hit all the emergency lights in that garage. We'll have 20 volunteers, each with a mobile camera, sweeping the floor. We'll light that place up like a stadium. I'll go. I'll meet him, but I won't be alone. I'll be in a sea of light." There was a long silence on the line. I could hear him breathing. I could hear him thinking, seeing the moves. "It's a high-risk move," he said. "It's my move," I retorted. "Are you with me or not?" "My team is already at the atrium," he said. "They're accessing the technical management plans. They're opening a new emergency exit from the B4 sublevel directly to the street, a new escape route. Delta 13. I'll have men on every level, in the vents, in the elevator shafts, but they will not engage unless it breaks." "Good," I said. "Just be my eyes. Be my exit. I'll be the voice." We met in the coffee stock supply room of the Blue Dock. It was dark, the only light coming from the hallway. It smelled of burlap and dark roast. It felt like a lifetime ago that he had kissed me here. There was no kiss now. There was no time. We were teammates, soldiers, and he was checking the gear. He handed me a small, hard-shell reflective vest. "Put this on. It's visible." "Good," I said, clipping it on. He then handed me a tiny black disc, a button mic. "It's hot. It feeds directly to an earpiece." He gently tucked the translucent, coiled wire into my ear, his fingers brushing my hair. The touch was professional, distant, but it still sent a shiver through me. "I'll hear what you hear. I'll speak. You're the only one who will hear me." I was wired, connected to him. We stood there for a second. The clock on the wall said 10:45 p.m. It was time. "Axton," I said, my voice low. He met my gaze. His face was a mask of cold control. If it breaks, like you said," I whispered. "If he moves on me, get me out. Don't try to be a hero. Don't try to win. Just pull me out. Promise me you won't pull the story out of the light." His eyes softened. Just for a fraction of a second, he understood. Don't make this a shadow war. Don't trade my life for his. He didn't say, "I promise." He just reached out and gripped my hand, not a romantic clasp, a hard, firm, soldier's grip. "I'm with you." He let go. "The lights go on now." I walked out of the stockroom and headed for the B4 garage. The garage was different. It wasn't the dim, yellow-lit tomb from the first night. The emergency lights were on, casting a harsh, blue-white glare over everything. It was cold, empty. My footsteps echoed, too loud. Silas Vargo was standing in the middle of the central aisle, exactly where he'd been in my nightmares. He looked terrible. His nose was crooked, clearly broken from my headbutt on the pier. There was a desperate, feral energy about him. He was wearing his cheap leather jacket. "You came," he sneered, "alone, stupid, just like he said you'd be." "I'm here, Silas," I said, my voice amplified slightly by the garage's acoustics. I stopped about 20 feet away from him. "Leave Maribel alone. This is between you and me. You've lost." "Lost?" He let out a high-pitched, giggling laugh. It was terrifying. "I haven't lost anything. I've just been inconvenienced. But you've lost everything. You just don't know it yet." He held up a small, black USB drive, the same one I'd given Axton. "No, not the same one, a different one." "This," he said, "is your past, the real one, the one you buried. Professor Phillips, the deposition, the settlement, the NDA, all of it. I've got a copy for every news outlet in this city. Your Public Minutes Community Committee, it's all going to be so public." He was blackmailing me with the one thing I still had to lose, my reputation, my future. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold. "You're going to walk over to that camera." He pointed to one of the new, dome-shaped atrium cameras on the ceiling. "And you're going to tell your new friends at the IFCB that you lied. You made it all up. The audio file, the pier, Everything. You were just a crazy, obsessed grad student. You do that and this." He waggled the USB. "Stays our little secret." I just stared at him. "Now, Eliza," Axton's voice whispered, sharp and low, in my ear. "Do the move, the one we talked about." I reached into my pocket. Silas tensed, his hand darting inside his jacket. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a small, portable projector, the one I used for my seminars. I clicked it on, and I aimed it at the big, blank concrete wall of the garage. An image flared to life. A scanned document, my own signature at the bottom, the non-disclosure agreement. What are you doing?" Silas stammered, confused. "You're right, Silas," I said, my voice booming, my mic picking it up, feeding it to Axton, to the volunteers I knew were waiting. "It is my past." I clicked again, a new image, a headline from my old university paper. "Student files complaint against tenured professor." "My name is Eliza Tran," I said, my voice not shaking at all. "In 2023, I was professionally and personally harassed by my advisor, Dr. Mark Phillips. I filed a formal complaint. I fought him, and I won a settlement, but I was forced to sign an NDA to silence me, to protect his reputation, to protect the school's reputation." I clicked again, a picture of me, younger, standing outside a courtroom. "You can't blackmail me with a story I'm not afraid to tell," I said, my voice ringing out in the cold, blue light. "You can't threaten me with the truth. My past isn't my weakness, Silas. It's my proof. It's why I'm here. It's why I fight." Silas stared at the wall, at my face, at my story, projected for the whole world to see. He was speechless. His one last piece of leverage, I had just taken it and turned it into a weapon against him. He let out a sound, a guttural, inhuman roar of pure, unadulterated rage. "You bitch, get her!" From the shadows, from behind the pillars, his two thugs appeared, the men from the first night. They ran at me. "Now, Axton," I yelled. Wham! Every single emergency light in the garage flashed to full, blinding, stadium-level brightness, and at the same time, from every stairwell, every ramp, the click, click, click of 30 sets of feet. The maritime safety volunteers poured in, their reflective vests identical to mine, their helmet cams all blazing with light. It was a sea of light, a tidal wave of cameras and witnesses. Silas's men stopped, blinded, confused. Silas looked around, trapped, and he was back on the pier, but this time, there was no smoke, there was no escape. He looked at me, his eyes full of a terrible, final hatred. "You love the lights so much," he screamed, fumbling inside his jacket for a phone, "then drown in the dark." He hit a button. There was a loud, heavy clang from the far end of the garage, the main breaker. And every light in the garage, every single one went out. Total, absolute blackness. I was blind. A second later, the helmet cams of the volunteers flickered back on, and then, one by one, flicker, flicker, die, flicker, die. The batteries, they were dead. Silas must have known, he must have planned. The darkness was heavier this time. It was a physical, suffocating weight. I was alone. I could hear men breathing. I could hear footsteps, slow, circling. My heart was going to explode. "Axton," I whispered, my hand pressed to my earpiece. "Axton, I can't see, the lights are dead." Silence. Then his voice, crackling, but there, calm, steady, the anchor in the dark. "It's okay, Eliza. They can't see you either." "What do I do?" I whispered, my back hitting a cold concrete pillar. "Look up," he said. "There's another light." I looked up. The blackness was absolute. My eyes strained, trying to find a form, a shape, a light. Nothing. "Axton, there's nothing," I whispered, my voice trembling, my back pressed so hard against the pillar I could feel the grit in the concrete. "Wait for it," his voice crackled in my ear. "Your eyes need to adjust. I had my team painted an hour ago. Look down, at your feet." I dropped my gaze from the oppressive ceiling to the floor, and I saw it. It was impossibly faint, a whisper of a line, no thicker than a piece of string, a pale, ghostly green, like something that lived deep in the ocean. It was phosphorescent paint, a breadcrumb, a path. It led from the base of my pillar and curved away into the dark. "Delta 13, his voice said. "It's the new exit. Follow it, now. Go." I took a breath. I pushed off the pillar and put my foot on the line. I was a tightrope walker in a void. Shuffle, step, shuffle, step. I could hear them, grunting, cursing in the dark. "Where is she?" Silas's voice, raw with fury. "Find her! She went this way!" Footsteps, heavy, clumsy, running near me. A hand brushed my shoulder. I flinched, stifling a scream, and darted forward, my feet desperate to stay on that glowing thread. The line took a sharp right around a large concrete support. I followed it. I heard Silas right behind me. He was faster. He must have seen the line too. "I see you, bitch," he hissed. I needed something. Anything. My backpack. I'd grabbed it from the supply room. It was heavy. I'd stuffed it, yes. Before I'd left the kiosk, I'd grabbed a 1-pound bag of the new holiday blend, the dusty one, a sample for the team. I ripped the bag from my backpack. I heard him lunge. I spun and threw the entire bag of finely ground coffee with all my strength, aiming for his face. The bag hit him square in the chest, exploding in a cloud of fine, dark, aromatic powder. He roared, words choking. I can't breathe, it's in my eyes." "He's blind," I whispered into my mic. "Keep moving." Axton's voice was urgent. "I'm routing you. The team sees you on infrared. They're diverting him." I didn't know what that meant, but I ran. The phosphorescent line was my entire world. It led me through a forest of parked cars. Then I heard it, a thud, a grunt, a gasp. It came from a side aisle just ahead of me. "Axton," I whispered, freezing. A problem was removed. His voice came back, slightly breathless. "The path is clear. Keep going. He's lost you." He'd done it. He'd moved in the dark, a ghost, and taken out one of Silas's men. Silently. Quickly. He wasn't a hero. He was a shark, and these were his waters. The glowing line ended. It stopped at a small metal panel on the wall next to the stairwell door. "The PA system," Axton said in my ear. "The panel is open. Find the all-call switch." I ran my hands over the cool metal. A small door, already ajar. Inside, a mess of wires and a single large, red switch. I flicked it on. A small green live light glowed. "What now?" I whispered. "You wanted to use your voice," he said. "The entire building is listening. The security office is listening." I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking. I had a backup. I always had a backup. The audio file. The original one Silas had sent. The one of Maribel's voice. The one threatening her. I'd copied it before I gave Axton the drive. I held my phone up to the small, grate-like microphone in the panel. I hit play. Silas's voice, cold and cruel, suddenly boomed through the entire B4 garage. "We find her again, and this time, we don't just take a picture." The threat echoed, amplified, bouncing off the concrete. It was no longer a private text. It was a public confession. From the stairwell, I heard a new sound, shouting, radios crackling, heavy boots. The atrium's security, the real ones. "Control, this is Sergeant Miller. We have confirmation of a direct threat on level B4. All units converge." They were coming. Hearing a direct, audible threat against a named civilian, they had no choice. The structural failure was being patched. Live. With adrenaline. "It's a trick," Silas's voice roared from the darkness, his nose clearly still broken. He must have cleared his eyes. They're working together. It's Caravella. He's here. He's Mafia. He's setting us all up." I gripped the PA microphone, my knuckles white. "He's right," I shouted, my own voice now echoing monstrous through the garage. "He's absolutely right. But let me ask you a question." I was speaking to the guards, to the shadows, to the whole building. "Has Axton Caravella, has he ever harassed a vulnerable woman on your shift? Has he ever filmed an employee? Or cornered a barista? or threatened your family to get what he wants? Has he ever made you choose between your safety and your paycheck? Silence. Only the sound of running feet. This, I shouted, is that choice. This is Protocol Sapphire. I'm a civilian. I'm unarmed, and I am being hunted. Choose now. A new voice. The security sergeants boomed over the PA system. All units, Protocol Sapphire is active. I don't care who he is. Protect the civilian. Protect Miss Tran. Move, move, move. It had worked. My thesis, my stupid academic bullshit thesis, it had just become law, a new protocol, named after the blue lilies or just a random color I'd never know. The lights flickered, a backup generator, somewhere deep in the building, must have kicked in. A few random red emergency lights snapped on, casting the garage in a bloody, hellish glow. I saw him, Silas, across the garage, by the up-ramp. He saw me. I ran. The chase was a nightmare. A spiral ascent up the garage ramp. I could hear him behind me, his heavy footsteps echoing. I could hear the security guards below, fanning out, their flashlights cutting through the dark. I reached the B2 level. I was trapped. I'd run into a dead end, a row of parked cars. I squeezed between a large SUV and a sedan, my back hitting the cold metal. Silas appeared at the end of the aisle. He was limping. He was breathing hard. He smiled, a bloody, broken-toothed grin. End of the line, Professor. He started walking toward me, slow. Clang, clatter, clatter. Something heavy and metal hit the concrete right in front of my feet. I looked up. On the catwalk above me, in the shadows, I saw a silhouette. Axton. He had dropped his keys, a heavy metal clip. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking under the car. He'd signaled. He'd given me the move. Slide. Silas lunged. I didn't hesitate. I dropped to the ground, my body scraping the oily concrete, and slid, feet first, right under the sedan. I felt the wind of Silas's hand grasping at the air where I'd just been. I scrambled out the other side, gasping, and stood up. I was in the clear. Silas was on the other side of the car, roaring in frustration. And I was standing in the only pool of clear light on the level, a single battery-powered emergency floodlight. Part of the new system had kicked in. It was my stage. He came around the car, his eyes wild. "Stop!" I yelled. He actually paused. I reached into my backpack. He tensed. I pulled out a piece of paper, a folded 20-page document, the draft, the Safe Intervention Rulebook the IFCB and I had been writing. What is that?" he spat. "Your homework." "It's the law," I said, my voice high and clear, "or it's about to be. Section 1, the right to a safe workplace. All employees and patrons have a right to an environment free from harassment, intimidation, or threat." You're reading to me," he was incredulous. Section 2, the duty to intervene security personnel who observe a verifiable threat must intervene. Failure to do so is a breach of contract and civil liability. I was reading it to him. I was reading him his rights. I was casting a spell. Silas just screamed. He didn't care about rules. He didn't care about words. He just charged, a wild, clumsy, desperate lunge. He was fast, too fast. A black shape came from my left. Axton. He'd come from the stairs. He didn't attack Silas, he just intercepted him. He put his body between us. Silas crashed into him, a collision of shoulders. Axton absorbed the blow, his arm snaking out, not to punch, but to push. He shoved Silas, hard, off balance. Silas stumbled backward, right toward the emergency gate panel by the main ramp. Axton looked at me. His eyes were hard. "Eliza now." I knew what to do. I ran to the panel. I didn't hesitate. I slammed my fist on the big red emergency roll-down button. A loud, screeching alarm blared. A heavy, transparent, rolling gate of reinforced glass and steel shot down from the ceiling. Silas spun, recovered his balance, and saw it coming. He tried to dive under it. He was too late. Clang! The gate slammed into the concrete, trapping him. He was on the ramp side. I was on the safe side. He was in a cage, a clear, transparent, perfectly lit cage. The municipal safety office. Their cars screeched up the ramp, their sirens finally wailing. They hadn't been able to intervene in a fight, but a contained suspect that was their jurisdiction. They piled out, guns drawn, all aimed at the man in the cage. From the other end of the garage, more lights, a work crew, Marta Judas, in a hard hat, walked calmly, clipboard in hand, flanked by port workers. They walked right past us, heading for a nondescript white van, Silas's package, no doubt. The one he was here to move. Marta just nodded at Axton, a cleanup. It was over. The garage was a sea of flashing red and blue lights. Cops were shouting. Volunteers were filming. Axton was leaning against the pillar, his chest heaving. He was breathing hard. I saw a long, red scratch on his forearm where Silas's jacket zipper must have caught him. I walked over to him. I didn't say anything. I just reached out and slowly, gently, took his hand. His fingers, rough and warm, closed around mine. I didn't need to say thank you. He didn't need to say he was sorry. It was all there, in that one solid, grounding touch. From behind the transparent gate, Silas pressed his bloody face against the panel. He looked at us, at me, and at Axton. Our hands joined. A slow, terrible smile spread across his broken face. "This story," he hissed, his voice muffled but clear. "It ain't over. Not by a long shot." I turned to look at him. I squeezed Axton's hand. "You're right," I said, my voice calm and clear, cutting through the noise. "The climax is at the end." The week after the B4 garage incident was a blur. Silas Vargo was in custody, denied bail, thanks to the mountain of high-definition footage from the Maritime Volunteers. The IFCB was fast-tracking a massive indictment against the entire Black Lantern outfit. It felt like a victory. But Silas wasn't the head. He was just a limb. The head was the money. The news broke on a Tuesday. Seastone Bank, the clean bank, the one Axton used, the one that sponsored the opera, announced it was re-evaluating its high-risk commercial partnerships. They were pulling their primary line of credit from the Skyline Atrium, effective in 30 days. The atrium, which had just been saved, was now facing bankruptcy. It was retaliation. A leak from a journalist at the Harbor Ledger confirmed it. Seastone wasn't just in bed with the Black Lanterns. They were the Black Lanterns. They were the night logistics. The men on the docks were just the muscle. The men in the boardrooms were the brain. And they were cutting off the atrium, my pilot program to send a message. The city panicked, the stock market wobbled, and I got an email, an invitation to speak before an emergency session of the Port Providence City Council. The topic, community economic safety and corporate intimidation. They had just handed me the biggest stage in the city. Axton was called, too, but not to the public session. He was summoned to a closed-door executive hearing with the IFCB and the city's ethics committee. They were going to try to pin the city's chaos on him, to make him the price of saving the city. He had a choice: stay in the shadows, protect his consortium, and let me face the council alone, or step into the light and risk losing everything. The night before the hearing, we met, not at the atrium, not in a car. We met on the cold, windswept end of Barrow Pier, the place he'd been left as a child. The water was black, the air sharp with salt. He stood staring out at the harbor, the weight of the city, of his entire life, on his shoulders. "You don't have to go tomorrow," I said quietly, standing beside him, not touching. "You can disappear. I know you know how." He looked at me, his eyes dark. "They'll crucify you, Eliza. They'll paint you as my pawn. They'll shred your committee, your rule book. They'll let Seastone win. And if you go," I said, "they'll crucify you. They'll use your past, your logistics, to take you apart. You'll be the scapegoat." He turned back to the water. This was the moment, the final choice. "Axton," I said, my voice soft but firm, "I don't need you to be perfect. I never did." He looked at me, a question in his eyes. "I just need you on the right side." The next morning, City Hall was a circus. Every news van in the state was parked outside. I sat in the front row of the chamber, my hands clasped, my written speech feeling flimsy and useless. The council president was droning on about financial stability and our city's reputation. The lawyer for Seastone Bank was there, looking smug. "We will now hear from our first speaker," the president said, the chair of the Atrium Oversight Committee, Miss Eliza Tran. Before I could stand, the main chamber doors at the back of the hall swung open. A dead silence fell. Axton Caravella walked in. He wasn't in a dark suit. He was wearing a light gray suit, a white shirt, no tie. He looked like a citizen. He didn't look at the press. He didn't look at the council. He didn't look at me. He walked past the public seating, past the barrier, and straight to the central podium. "Mr. Caravella," the president stammered, "you are not on the public agenda. You are scheduled for a closed session." "I respectfully decline the closed session," Axton said. His voice, unamplified, filled the room. It was the calm, steady voice of the man who had cleaned cups in the dark. "I believe in Miss Tran's policy of public minutes." The cameras were flashing, a storm of light. "My name," he said, "is Axton Caravella, and I am the concerned benefactor. I am the primary investor. I am the man who funded the new security measures at the Skyline Atrium." The room exploded. Shouts, questions. "I did it," he continued, his voice cutting through the noise. "Through a series of private holding companies. I bent the rules. I did it because this council and the system it represents had failed. You created a power vacuum. I stepped in." He owned it, all of it. "And now, Seastone Bank wants to punish this city for an attempt to create safety. They are holding you hostage. So, I will make this simple." He looked at the council. "My consortium will guarantee the Atrium's line of credit. Personally, the bank will be made irrelevant." The Seastone lawyer leaped to his feet. "This is an outrage. This man, he's admitting to financial crimes. He's a mobster." "No," Axton said. "I'm a businessman, and I have one more condition. I am creating a new municipal fund, the Light Fund. It will be seeded with $10 million of my own money to install these same community-led security upgrades in every commercial center in Port Providence. I am challenging this council to match it." He had just turned his confession into a city-wide mandate. The president was banging his gavel. Order, this is, I said, standing up from my seat, "is the solution." I walked to the podium and stood next to him. I looked out at the chaos, at the cameras, at the confused, angry faces of the council. "My name is Eliza Tran," I said, my voice clear. "And this started, for me, with a single call to security. It started when I was told, 'We don't interfere.' I told them everything. I told them about the streamer. I told them about the guards who walked away. I told them about the garage and the bridge and the threats. I told them about the podcast and the We Don't Interfere hashtag. I told them about the B4 garage and reading my own history on a concrete wall. "Mr. Caravella didn't create this problem," I said, my voice ringing with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "He's just the symptom of your failure. You failed to protect us. You left us in the dark, and he, a man who knows the dark, stepped in." I looked at Axton. "I don't condone his methods, but I cannot argue with his results. The Skyline Atrium is now the safest building in this city. The right to safety is not a luxury. It is the standard, and this council will adopt it." "She's his pawn," the Seastone lawyer screamed. "There is no proof of any wrongdoing by my client." "Point of order," a new voice yelled from the back. I looked. It was Maribel. She was standing on a chair, holding a laptop high. "My name is Maribel Ochoa. I am a former intern at," she named the biggest law firm in the city, "and I have proof." She clicked a button. On the big screens, the ones meant for zoning permits, a document appeared, a chain of emails. "This," Maribel shouted, "is a leaked email thread between a senior partner at Seastone Bank and Silas Vargo. It confirms a transfer of $200,000, just one day before the attack on Calder Dock." "That's inadmissible," the lawyer shrieked. "It was provided to me," Maribel said, her voice triumphant, "by Miss Marta Judas, the port's intermediary, who is currently giving a full statement to the IFCB. It's over." The chamber had just broke. The council president was yelling, the Seastone lawyer was running for the exit, the press was surging forward. The council voted. It was chaos. Yes to the Light Fund. Yes to the citywide rulebook. Yes to a full, independent investigation of Seastone Bank. We had won. We were walking down the marble steps of City Hall, a sea of microphones and cameras surrounding us. I felt light, exhausted. Axton was beside me, his hand on my back, guiding me through the crowd. And then I saw him. In the middle of the crowd, Silas Vargo. How he'd made bail, a last-ditch, desperate act. His eyes were not on Axton. They were on me. They were dead. I saw the glint of steel in his hand, a folding knife. He lunged. "Eliza!" Axton shouted. He moved, a blur of gray, his body ready to intercept, to take the blade. But he stopped. He stopped, mid-stride. He'd seen my eyes. He was trusting me. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I had been in that self-defense class with Maribel. I had lived this nightmare for weeks. I didn't step back. I stepped in. As Silas came at me, I pivoted, just as I had on the pier. I didn't try to punch. I didn't try to hurt. I grabbed the wrist that held the knife. I used his own forward momentum, twisted and locked his joint. It was a clean, simple, defensive move. No blood, no excessive violence. He screamed as his wrist popped. The knife clattered onto the stone steps. The crowd gasped, a single, unified sound, then silence. The cameras flashed, capturing the moment, me, in my simple consultant suit, holding this broken man in a perfect legal wrist lock. City Hall guards were on him in a second, pinning him to the ground, cuffing him. It was finally, completely over. I let go, and I started to shake, the adrenaline. The weeks of fear, it all came crashing down. My knees buckled. Axton was there. He caught me. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me up as I trembled, his hand on the back of my head. Then he took off his suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders. I was leaning against him, his heart hammering against my ear, surrounded by the sound of sirens and the flash of cameras and the smell of roasted coffee coming from a vendor cart on the corner, warm, safe. Later, in the quiet of the sedan, the city lights sliding by, he was silent. "If you want me to," he said, his voice a low rasp, "I will. I'll liquidate. I'll walk away from the docks, the consortium, everything. I'll go." He was offering to erase himself, the orphan from the pier, ready to disappear again. I looked at him, at this man who had learned to breathe in the dark, who had bought me a grinder, who had asked, "May I touch you?" "No," I whispered. Don't go back into the shadows." I reached out and touched the scar on his cheek. Stay, and use that power the right way, with me. Weeks later, the blue dock. It was quiet. The new Breville machine was humming, a low, pleasant, industrious sound. The old screaming grinder was gone. On the wall, next to the menu, was a newly framed document, the Skyline Atrium Safe Intervention Rulebook. He walked up, 9:07 p.m. I smiled, the usual. He nodded, that faint, almost smile on his lips, black, no sugar. I made his coffee. I passed him the cup. He didn't just take it. He tapped his cup against mine, a silent toast. Above us, on the atrium's new display monitor, a news ticker was running. Breaking Seastone Bank CEO and 2 board members indicted by IFCB. Governor signs statewide Light Fund, citing Port Providence model. Skyline Atrium named National Model for Public-Private Safety Initiative. I looked at Axton. He was looking at me. I clocked out. He was waiting. We walked out of the main doors. It was raining. Of course it was. But it was a soft rain, a mist, not the attacking, violent storm from that first night. He stopped me under the awning, and he didn't just kiss me. He looked at me. his eyes asking that same question from the darkness. "May I?" I nodded. And the kiss was slow. It was steady. It was a question, and a wait, and an answer. All at once. It wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. He took my hand, and we walked out together into the rain, into a city where the streetlights seemed brighter, and the shadows no longer held all the power. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below so we can share our thoughts. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give us a huge boost by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.